I'm not going to show you any slides, so it's going to be somewhat boring today. We're going to try to make a story out of it. I'm not going to try and speak for the entire time I have allotted because I want to hear from you. In a lot of ways, I'm humbled to be asked to come out here and to speak to all of you during lunch. And why that is because I think that you all in this room could take this organization further faster than any other group of individuals working in conservation. I don't just mean working at the Nature Conservancy. And I'll tell you why. That's really sort of the heart of my talk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a secret. Just about everything you know about nature and how to save it may be wrong, including the how to save it part. But before I tell you why our sworn enemies might really be our best partners, why Facebook and the iPod and the iPad might really change the way we experience nature, and why people who earn less than $1.25 a day, people who never make it into conferences like this, might hold the key to everything. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. So I was born on an island, as Jackie said, and when I was born, this is something Asians do, apparently, my grandmother looked at my head. And on the top of my head, I have hair patterns, cowlicks, swirls. And these are red in our culture, just like you read palms. It's sort of funny because I've never seen anyone else do that except we do it, and it seems sort of obvious to do. So the baby's born, I'm born, they look at my head. My grandmother kind of noticed something weird, and so she rushes off to the most famous astrologer on the island. He looks at my head, and after some payment of money, and like a couple of chickens or something like this, he makes his pronouncement. So my grandmother, the matriarch of the family, comes home and tells my family, my mother and my family, that I will die by drowning. And this is why I live in Montana. So for a few years as a kid, I was not allowed to go to the ocean. It's kind of heartbreaking for a child. You get to go near the ocean, but I was never allowed to go in it. I was never allowed to go in water or anything like that. And that was the case till I was about 9 or 10 years old. And then my mother, breaking social convention, taught me how to swim. And as Jackie said, since then, I've gone on to host something on Shark Week for Discovery Channel. And that's the way I've seen the world always, with optimism, with some sense of fearlessness that sometimes I don't feel, but this belief that if you keep swimming, it'll work out, right? And I think that's exactly where we are in the environmental movement. We're at this really strange inflection point today, where it feels like we are trying to still cling on to our ideas about how the world should work, rather than embrace the way in which it actually works, and then do the hard things necessary to get us there. Look, it's logical. If you know the kid's going to die from drowning, keep him out of the water is a pretty good strategy. It's a very safe strategy. It's a pragmatic strategy. Right? But I bet if I go around and poll all of you, the majority of you, maybe all of you will say, no. If I know this is what's going to come get me, give me a chance. I want to learn how to swim. So the death of the environment has been foretold. You all know it. The litany is long. We poisoned our oceans. We changed the acid content of it to the point where corals might not be able to form. We use up over half of all the photosynthesis energy that plants get from sunlight. We've changed all the basic nitrogen and phosphorus cycles on the planet. We're changing the atmosphere. The 6th extinction crisis upon hand. You guys know all of this. The death of the environment has been foretold. The question is, what do we do about it? Do we try to swim? Do we learn how to swim? So why have we failed so miserably in some ways? When I look back at the environment, I look back 20 years ago when I was going to graduate school and how absolutely optimistic I was about what I was going to do. I was coming out there like a good soldier, and I was going to march into battle, and we were going to make a difference. And look at us now, slightly apathetic about it all. You know, twice a day we think about quitting, right? I mean, be honest about it, right? I mean, twice a day you think about quitting, not because you don't love where you work, or the people you work with, or the opportunities you're given, but all the opportunities that you feel are still unmet. Right? That's why we get frustrated. So why does that happen? It's probably happened for a few reasons. The first is probably because our membership, the people who we count on as our supporters, have really gone off, as Jeff puts it, a demographic cliff. Our membership is getting older. Every year I stay in the Conservancy, our membership gets older by 6 months. I've worked this out. When I retire, gift planning is going to be really happy, right? So that's one reason. The second reason is probably because we have this sort of outmoded way in which we want to communicate our message, right? So we have used this sort of 1970s Vietnam era sort of mentality of body counts. So here are the bad facts, and therefore linearly, this is what you need to do about it. And that just doesn't work in today's world anymore. And the third reason is maybe because we don't really have empathy for people who don't think like us. And I'll kind of come back to that, and maybe we'll have some questions on that. But I've come to this realization that, I know this sounds strange coming from me, but love and empathy play a big role in what we're trying to do. If we can't hear the other side, people who are not like us, we're never going to make a difference. All right. So those are some of the reasons why I think we have really struggled in this movement. And don't get me wrong, there have been plenty of successes, and this weekend is a lot about celebrating those successes. But as a movement, we've not done that great. In the 1970s with Rachel Carson and others, we really felt like a movement. We passed all these big acts, but then we sort of sputtered along after that. So what did we do? What's our strategy been? What's the strategy of the environmental community been thus far? We have collected money from a few wealthy individuals and used it to do two things: buy land or influence government policy. Money from a few in order to change government policy. What is that? Special interest, right? And as the world gets bigger and there's more people, we get more and more special. But I'm telling you, to be special in this field is to be irrelevant. We really need to make our movement common, not special. So if you accept some of what I'm saying here, let me tell you what I mean about who can we then turn to in order to turn things around and really create a tribe, create a community, create a movement for a new age. We need the ignored, we need the forgotten, and we need the despised. In other words, we need corporates, partners, corporations, we need the youth, and we need the poor. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, all right, so okay, great. He flew all the way from Montana to tell us that we need companies, youth, and poor. Yeah, we do, and we haven't done a great job about it. We're moving in the right direction. I'm not going to tell you what I mean by that and why I think those three factors or those three forces are going to be the most influential in helping us propel our niche, our special interest, into a movement. So last year I was in Ecuador, in Quito, looking at our waterfronts. But then I went to the other side of the country, the coast, to a little town called Puerto Lopez. And if you go to Puerto Lopez, it's a beach community, like many other beach communities on the coast, beautiful. And as you go through there, you start seeing little towns, and all the towns are lined with little restaurants, all serving, ceviche and cerveza, right there on the beach. So I went into one with some of my colleagues from Latin America, and we sat down there, and the proprietress came out. And her name, true, is Margarita. And so we asked Margarita, I just asked, just out of curiosity, what's the hardest thing about running a business here? And I thought she was going to say fish, or she might say getting a good cook, or she might say customers, or anything like that. You know what she said? She said agua, water. And then she takes us to the back of the restaurant, and she shows us two taps. The taps are fully open. There are pink plastic buckets underneath it, waiting for that minor miracle when one day a week, water starts coming out of that tap. So for this woman, small business owner, her biggest impediment to growing her business, keeping her restaurant open, was the uncertainty of a basic resource, water. So where does she actually get her water for that? She pays her municipal bills, by the way. It's all connected up. She pays the bill every month. She actually gets her water from a truck that goes to the Arampa River, which we went to, and it's actually a dry sand river. And the truck pumps the water out and then drives into town and sells it to her for 25 bucks. That's how that works. And that uncertainty is paralyzing. Now, if you go 200 miles inland and you go to Quito, the capital, and you open the tap in the hotel, clean, cold water comes rushing out. It's great water. and the clean cold water comes rushing out because you all know the story. The mayor of Quito visited with one of our staff members to New York, was inspired by the waterworks that happens in New York City, went back and decided to try and apply it to the city of Quito and created the water fund. Our initial investment in that was something like $1,000. Today, the Quito Water Fund, which simply put is a way of transferring a payment for a service downstream to the protectors of that service upstream, the Quechua Indian communities who live high in the the Inca communities who live high in the Andes, get money from the city of Quito in order to change their agricultural practices. That's basically the system. Produces $800,000 every year without involvement from the Conservancy. That's amazing. That's an amazing replicable system, and you know this. We're now expanding it to lots of other cities out there. But to me, that was an example of a business being stymied in growth simply because of a lack of resources. So now you think, well, that's only good for the small companies. And you all know about the great examples like Patagonia and others, who for years dominated this niche market of being green, so they could sell us, people like you and I who could afford it, nice stuff. We were willing to pay that premium in order to wear a green product. But the great thing about it today is that the big companies are all getting in on it as well. And they're getting in on it not just because of corporate social responsibility. That's the most amazing thing about it. It's no longer about doing good. As one of the guys from General Mills told me, today sustainability equals availability. Right? Sustainability equals availability. So if you're a big company, you've got 6 billion people, 7 billion by the end of the year, growing to 9 billion, you better be worried about it. If you want to sell to that number of people, you better really start thinking about where your goods and services are coming from. Richard Branson says he wants to build a company like there is a tomorrow. So when Richard Branson says, I want to build something like there is a tomorrow, what is he talking about? He's talking about long-term sustainability. And the biggest problem for that is uncertainty. And the biggest uncertainty is not labor markets or price of goods or even terrorist attacks. The biggest uncertainty is raw materials, and where do they come from, and eventually running out of them. So that's a huge change that we've seen today, purely because of demographic growth, that we can take advantage of. The second one, I'm not going to talk very much because you have so many speakers here who are really cognizant of it and could do much better job with me than I, and that is about how to reach youth. So we all get it. Jeff's big into this, of course. You've seen what he's put out there. But let me just sort of come at it slightly differently. So I have a 9-year-old niece. I write about her extensively. This is the lack of having my own kids. I also write about neighbors' pets and other people's plants. But in my life, I borrow things. So my 9-year-old niece goes with me to the aquarium. She's really into nature and all this sort of stuff. And to put this in perspective, her parents are not. They're both in the financial world. They both run financial companies. My sister only agreed to visit Montana when she heard there was 4 seasons there, but she, of course, thought that was the resort. But my niece is really into nature. I don't know where she gets it, but she's got it. So I take her to the New England Aquarium, and she has her iPad with her. And as we go in, I say, Apsara, leave your iPad behind in the car. And she says, why? And I can't really come up with a good answer. It's like, she's looking at me like someone told me, leave your coffee mug behind. Because this world that we bifurcate, online and then offline, doesn't exist for those kids anymore. It's kind of merging. They can be online and outside at the same time. And by the end of this whole process of going through the aquarium with her iPad, she had created a presentation that she had shared with her entire class. And so it became instantly a social experience as well. So this is what's changed about it. So why hasn't the Conservancy gone into education and kids a long time ago? A lot of people think it's because of, with mission drift and all that. It's actually quite simple. It's because it's too difficult to do 10 years ago. So imagine I or any of you went and gave a great dynamite talk to your kids' school. So you talked to these kids, and the kids were jazzed up. And then someone else said, hey, come do this to my school. What do you have to do? Truck over there and do it again. And then you have to do it again. There's no way of scaling it up. The reason why we haven't tried to get that youth market is scaling up is impossible to do until now. So now when you have social media and you have these technology tools that you can use to apply that media, you can all of a sudden really think about scaling up. And the program that Jeff alluded to a little bit ago, where we are going to try and take our science content and getting out into schools directly through interactive whiteboards. That technology is new, it's growing tremendously, but what's amazing is we can now reach kids for pennies ahead. It's actually less than pennies ahead. That's where it becomes amazing. So the potential to scale up is huge and virtually infinite. So when you think about kids and you think about reaching that, you really have to learn to play and enjoy playing in that social space. And understand that for kids, it is a social experience. The way we were brought up, certainly the way I was brought up, was to think about going out into nature as a solitary experience. Right? So Ed Abbey, Desert Solitaire. Now what you don't know is when Ed Abbey was also writing Desert Solitaire at the same time, in his personal diaries, he was pining for people. He's actually pining for his girlfriend, but he was still pining for people. Right? So he was tremendously lonely while he was writing this book. Or John Muir. All these people were these icons who would go out into nature alone. Look at it. Go to a park today. Go look at who is going on the trail, kitted out in like Patagucci, and then look at who's in the meadows near the parking lot. So out there, it'll be usually white, kind of energetic, and people who look somewhat angry about trying to conquer that peak. And then you go to the meadows and the parking lots, and you'll hear music, and you'll see food, and there'll be like this Asian family there, and it'll be like the mother and the grandmother and the kids and the aunties, and they'll all have a big picnic, and they're loud as hell, and they're slightly annoying, but they look like they're having a lot of fun. I understand that different people are going to experience nature in lots of different ways than what you and I are comfortable with. And don't get me wrong, look, I live in Montana because, I've said this before, but I actually like going out to walk in the woods when a big, scary animal with big fangs could come out and kill me. But that's just me. That kind of makes the walk a little bit more exciting. But for most people, go out in nature because something can come out and kill you is just not that resonant, right? So you have to understand that nature is a social experience, right? To be alive is to be social. That's the difference between a frog and the rock it sits upon. And so you have nature, the ultimate social network, and what we need to do is make sure kids are plugged into it, not continually telling them, no, these two things are separate. All right. So my last one is in some ways the one that's closest to my heart. And that's the 1.5 billion people now who live on less than $1.50 a day, a couple of billion people who live on less than $2 a day. It's all relative, of course. There's a new report that came out today that says that 1 in 6 Americans are below the poverty line. 1 in 6 below the poverty line. Most of us don't get to talk to them. They never make it into the conferences I get to go to. But they're the ones who are going to want more. They're the ones who created the Arab Spring. They're the ones who are going to yearn for more, and if we don't find a way of figuring that out, it's all going to go to hell. And I feel strongly about it because I think that their needs are very much connected to nature. Some years ago, and a few of you have heard me tell the story, I was in West Africa, in Sierra Leone, which is the country I grew up in as a kid. And about 6 years ago, I went through there for the BBC on a film project. And I was trekking through a village, and I came upon late at night, late in the evening, almost dark, it was raining. I stumbled into this little village, and I see a group of kids who are burning the fur off a dead monkey. A little monkey. It's not an endangered monkey. It's a spot-nosed Cercopithecus, common garden variety monkey. And there was a gaggle, if there was such a common garden variety monkey, that was it. There was a gaggle of kids around it. There was a little pot, and this monkey was going into the pot, and they were getting the fur off. And I was like looking at that scene. I took a couple of pictures, and I sort of went along. And then later on in my tent, I looked through those pictures. I still have the picture. We published it. And the picture is kind of amazing because this kid who's sort of squatted on the ground and doing this had a piece of metal that was a little bit bigger than this, but a piece of metal that he had cut out of a signboard. The signboards that litter every developing country that, advertise all kinds of things. And he was using this to furiously fan the flames of this smoky, wet fire as he was doing this with the monkey and getting the fur off it. And I looked at that signboard, and it's captured in the photo, and it said WFP on it, which stands for the World Food Program. And it was like this light bulb. You know, you rarely get light bulb moments, but that moment to me, I swear, was a light bulb moment because it was amazing, right? So here's this kid who's using the World Food Program signboard in order to fan the flames, to build a fire in order to burn the fur off the monkey that he's going to eat. And then it struck me that in countries like Sierra Leone, when governments and aid organizations and charities have completely failed the people, it's nature that still provides the ultimate social services. I mean, it's nature that provides that security net. And when we break that, we break it at our own peril. Even in my town in Missoula, Montana, you know, half the population in winter, the primary source of protein in my town is game meat, is bush meat. It's elk and deer and ducks and waterfowl. It's astonishing. And this can be repeated over and over again. This example that you gave last night about the Flint River in Atlanta, it's this amazing program the Georgia program has pushed, whereby we change the way farmers irrigate their fields in order to reduced water by 17% out of that river. And the day I arrived in Atlanta 2 years ago, the mayor was praying for rain. The mayor was praying for rain while we were actually doing something about it. And that savings actually meets essentially the needs that Atlanta has in terms of water. So this connection to nature is strong, and it resonates with people who don't have very much. And it's something we need to strengthen. The same thing is true in the Solomon Islands and in Indonesia, where we have fish banks, a way to save fish in order for people to feed off the interest that they get when the fish swim out of the marine protected areas. It's the same thing in northern Kenya that Ron just recently was visiting. You know, you go to northern Kenya. We just did this study in northern Kenya. You know, we work with the Lewa Conservancy in Kenya in order to do conservation on very large landscapes out there. And there's a lot of NGOs, a lot of organizations who have been working with local communities there in order to strengthen conservation. So we went and did a survey, and we asked the people, what has conservation done for you? And I thought the first thing they would say would be something like, oh, it's helped us with ecotourism, or it's helped us, you know, you see a lot of little trinkets and things that the women in particular are making in order to sell. I thought they would talk about that and how sales for beads and necklaces have gone up or anything like that. You know what the number one reason they said conservation has done for them? Security. Security. Conservation has improved our security. As one woman puts it on camera, she says, conservation, she doesn't use the word conservation, but basic conservation has allowed me to sleep with my shoes off at night. When a Samburu woman is saying this, because it means that there are no marauding raiders coming in to attack the village, because now there are little poacher outposts, the little conservation outposts spread all through that northern region. It's a very, very powerful thing. The number two thing, transportation. The number three thing is communications. Just because we funded ranger posts in this northern region, all of a sudden people feel more secure. We would have never thought of that connection. We would have never thought of that connection. So it matters to people, and it matters particularly to poor people, and I don't want you to forget that, because I think sometimes we do when we hang out at CGI and at TED and all these sort of fancy things, that there are a couple of billion people out there who have very, very little, who never get to talk to us, but who are the drivers and who will want more. You know, there are more cell phones in India than there are toilets. Well, those people want more. And unless we find a way to remind them and strengthen that connection with nature, then it's sort of game over. So those are my three constituencies, and I see all of you in marketing as our front line in being able to engage those constituencies. To me, that's what it's all about, awakening the environmental movement. It's how well can you help us engage with corporations, because it serves their self-interest in terms of reliance and sustainability, with youth, because that's the power that's out there, and the socialness of nature, and with those people whose voices we rarely get to hear, right? That's what I want you to take away from this. So to sort of close up and wrap this up and open it up a little bit to questions, the last thing I sort of want to get at is this question of empathy, and why I sort of said, you know, empathy and love is something that's a little bit missing in the way we talk and how we talk about things. I was recently at Mountain Film. So I'll tell you something. So I go and give a lot of talks at the Conservancy, obviously, right? And I give lots of different talks on lots of different topics. And I'm in new states almost every day. And whenever I land in a state, someone within the first hour or so will pull me aside and sort of very gently say, so glad you're here. You know, and you're going to meet these trustees today and you're going to give this talk, and that's great. But can you try not to talk about, and then some animal or some topic will then be put down. And in Jackson, Wyoming, it's don't talk about wolves. In Africa, it's don't talk about elephants, whatever the animal of concern is. And it invariably happens everywhere I go. So here I am in Telluride, one of the richest little communities in America. How many of you have been to Telluride? Wow, look at you. Okay, so I get down there, and I get into this van, and there's a bunch of other people. I'm there for the Mountain Film Festival, but I'm also speaking for the Conservancy. And one of our staff is there, and they say, listen, great that you're here. We're excited to have you. But whatever you do, can you not talk about the Gunnison prairie dog? So wrote it about this big. I'm like, really? So now the entire van sort of heard this. And the driver instantly picked this up. And he said, oh yeah, this town's been ruined because of this, and proceeds to tell me the story. Basically, when you drive from the airport into town, you go through a stretch of meadow. It's about maybe 10,000 acres of meadowlands. That meadowlands was bought by the town for $50 million. It was a huge controversy in town because there's a long story here. There's a developer, this, that, and the other. The town finally bought it, partly because of this prairie dog, partly because they wanted that open space, but it's enormously costly. Well, what's happening now is the prairie dogs are just taking over. And when you drive through, it really looks like a gravel pit. It's like dug up. You think it's a construction. I'm not lying to you. Go look at it. It's like a construction zone. So now the town is like, well, maybe we should control these things. Like maybe we should poison them, maybe we should shoot them. So the whole town is polarized about this. And this driver clearly didn't live in Telluride, couldn't afford to. He lived in another town. He was one of those workers who'd come in every day to do this. Was telling me why this was the dumbest thing I ever did. Meanwhile, 2 or 3 people in the back of the truck van disagreed with him and said, no, we are in Jackson. We live here. We have a second home here. This is the greatest thing that happened. And this is why, and it's important to do this, and blah, blah, blah. And I caught in the middle, so they're both trying to convince me. And the back of the truck was loud enough and insistent enough, and they were the customers, that eventually this truck driver shut up. And when we left off, I knew, without a doubt, we never made a friend that day. There was nothing we had done to even change his mind slightly. We had just reinforced his attitude that conservation is for rich folks with 50, gigantic Learjets and, Grimmons and everything else parked on that runway. Who are we to talk about this? And I gave 4 talks in Telluride during that time, and every one of those talks, someone in the audience would ask me about this. And my answer was always simple. Look, if you guys in the richest little town in America can't figure out what to do about a prairie dog this big, then forget me trying to convince people in India not to kill tigers or not to kill rhinos, or everything else is up for grabs, right? And that's what I mean about empathy. You don't have to disagree. You don't have to agree with people who disagree with you. But you have to be willing to open your ears and listen to them, and really listen to them. It's very, very hard to do. Right? Think of this. Imagine Sarah Palin did a phenomenal movie about coral reefs. Right, Steph? She collaborated and did a fantastic movie about coral reefs. Be honest. Would you bring that in and put it in and say, hey guys, come on over and watch it? You probably would. But a lot of people would just say, no way, I'm not going to watch this because she did it. That's the way a lot of people feel about Inconvenient Truth and what Al Gore did. And when we take half the country and demonize them and just hang out with people who are sort of like us, we forget that. And I just don't want you, the marketers of our organization, to forget that. That's the audience that we haven't captured yet. And the first way of capturing it is to have empathy and even love for what they have to say. Most people in this country are pretty good, pretty hardworking people. They don't see the world in this political divide that everyone else sees it in. And it's our job to keep reminding them that we get along all the time. When I go to the car mechanic and drop my keys off, I don't figure out what party he voted for, and he doesn't ask me, right? So things actually work all the time. And we shouldn't forget that when we try to get our message out there. So, I always have said that we are probably the luckiest generation on the planet. And I do mean that in a lot of ways. You know, if you go to East Africa, there's a place called Lautoli. And in Lautoli, you'll see footprints that were laid down 3.8 million years ago by an early primate, an early hominid that walked across those plains of East Africa. And it's actually a pair of them. And you can make that out. One is a female, one is a male. And they probably had a kid, because you can see the tilt in one of the tracks, probably as she had a baby on her hip. And there's a moment where the tracks stop and they turn as if they're seeing something coming over the horizon. They're seeing some moment of indecision, danger or opportunity. And for 3.5 million years, we have seen the planet in that way, with this one view of the planet from Earth. We see about 2.5 miles on flat ground. After that, the curvature of the Earth takes our sight away. And then in our generation, we see the whole planet. And we can put it up there at any time we want. And we see the whole planet all at once, in that one moment. It's kind of amazing. Our brains can just explode in that moment when we saw it, right? You think about that length of evolution of seeing something in one way and then all of a sudden getting to see it in a completely, utterly different way. And nothing will be the same again. That moment is right now. You know, 50 years ago, we genuinely didn't know the things that we know about the planet, the way in which we are impacting it, and the way in which it is providing for us. 50 years from today, I am utterly sure that it will be too late. That inflection point would have come, and we would be known as the biggest losers that have ever lived out there. So the time to act really is now, and I think we have this narrow window. And my plea to you today is simply because I feel like I'm running out of time. And I suspect many of you feel that as well sometimes. And so I want you to take that moment and to understand that we really all have to start swimming. Thank you.